So I was recently in a little bit of a haggle, and I thought I would bring it onto the YouTubes here. Somebody had said that you don't always know when you're talking, either to yourself or to other people. And other people went, "Oh, that's not true. You are always aware of the fact when you're speaking." And sort of discussion blew out, and there were some people very animate, saying it doesn't make any sense to claim that you could be talking without knowing that you're talking, whether it's to yourself or to other people. And other people are saying, no, it happens all the time. You're just not aware of it, and that's the rub. Okay, so what I want to see if I could do here is, I guess, unpack some of the different ways to come at this issue. And there's a lot of different ways that I guess people have tried to clarify it, and I'm going to see if I can't spell out why I think it is possible to have self-talk or words going on at various levels, whether one is aware of it or not. Okay, so the first one is kind of a classic, almost apocryphal tale. My guess is many people have heard it before. I did have a guy actually try to use it on me when I was in graduate school, so in some sense it's close to home to me, but it's also sort of a well-known story, right? And so this guy had been in the Army for like 3 years, and he comes home for Thanksgiving Day dinner, and he says, dinner's going on, and he says, "Hey, Ma, can you pass the fucking potatoes?" And she said, "David, your language." And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, can you pass the fucking potatoes, please?" And, there was this sense in which he had been swearing in the Army so often and been so surrounded with cuss words that it passed below his level of awareness. And so even though he was using it, he wasn't aware of it. I think it's very similar to the way people use or like, and unless they get on YouTube and start to shoot a video or regularly post videos where they become hypersensitive and highly scrutinizing their own word choice and their kind of discourse, I think some of the word choices and the actual flow of discourse, it goes beneath or below someone's level of conscious awareness, or at least it can. Okay, see if I can get a whole different set of analysis that's on the same phenomena, but not so just focused on one little instance of word choice and stuff. Okay, so there seems to be a whole larger class of phenomena that are sometimes called pre-reflective engagements or pre-thetic engagements. So, there's different ways to shake it out, but it would be, sometimes you get in your car and it'll be you start your car, and people report this commonly, right? They start their car, and then they're really engaged in thought. They're really lost thinking about some important matters of the day. And as they're parking their car, they're suddenly having this, crisis of, was I careful? Did I stop at all the stops? Did I do everything? It's as if their body was on like a kind of autopilot, and their thought was completely occupying attention. Now, I think we've probably all had that sense of being in some degree of so lost in thought that we don't really remember the particulars of our body movements and sort of stuff. But it's the opposite case of that, right? I mean, the opposite case is you're doing some handiwork. Maybe you're crafting, you're doing some needlework. Maybe you are washing dishes. You might be just cleaning something, working on tools. It could be something like this, where you're so closely attending to the handiwork that you're engaged in that the process of talking to yourself goes unnoticed. It's just like you're talking to yourself and it's on autopilot, and yet you don't really register that fact. Part of it goes back to this question of, is there a thinker of thoughts? Now, somebody, I think, wants to say, well, there is a thinker of the thought, and there does seem to be a sense in which we can shake that out, and we can say, yes, people make conscious decisions over word choice. If there's a bunch of people in a room and many people are talking, your attention can somewhat bobble in and out of particular conversations, and so there does seem to be something like a conscious directed intention. And yet all of that is so limited, right? Some of that, it isn't going to work the more rigorously or the more thoroughly we try to think about it. That it seems more to be the case that thought thinks of thinkers thinking thoughts then there is some thinker who thinks thoughts. That is, Alan Watts has a story, it goes something like this. You can imagine that thought is like a burning torch, and it's a torch that's moving. Now, if the torch starts to move really quickly, it gives the appearance of a kind of a circle there. Now, the circle is produced because the torch moves so quickly, and imagination, memory, sort of visual capacities, they give a register, a circle where there's really just a continuous movement. And the analogy would be that thought is like the torch, and the thinker is really like the circle. It's a phenomena that can appear sometimes when thought takes a particular movement of sort of folding back upon itself. But there isn't a thinker independent of the thought, outside of the thought. That is, the thinker is a certain kind of constructive re-relating of the ongoing eventful processes of thought. Okay, so see if we can get at that even further of, how often do people have a song stuck in their head? So let's get at that. You wake up in the morning and you're going about your business, and suddenly you realize that there is a song stuck in your head. Okay. Now, if there is a thinker of the thought, or if people are always aware of the fact when they're thinking, then, or when they're talking to themselves, then you should just be able to prevent yourself from sticking songs in your head. Like, why did you stick it there? No, I think the actual experience is that we come to ourselves, we postulate something like the thinker of thought, and then it's a recognition that there is a thought already underway that's been repeating itself without awareness. You come to find yourself with the song already stuck there, although you didn't stick it there, right? Try to think of it as maybe like breathing, right? If you tell people, try to stop thinking right now, the most common strategy will be to hold the breath. The person will go like that, and it makes sense, right? Speech and breath, common roots to spirit, and the meaning is that they're both semi-autonomous processes. One can try to control one's thought in the same way that one can try to control one's breathing. It will take discipline and practice, and ultimately it will be limited, and you can try to control it, regulate it, be very careful with it, but ultimately, as soon as you let go of conscious control and conscious demand, it just picks up on its own autonomous accord. It unfolds according to habits and practices and cultural conventions. It's like a stream of where you've been and the kinds of things you've exposed yourself to. They hook and ride and flow through you. They're sort of, you're a conduit for various social, historical, and symbolic processes. But you do have something like a conscious control, at least the directing of it to limited degrees and the kind of selections that one can make. But ultimately, we talk to ourselves, we talk to others without always being aware of the fact. It's not that we're doing it all the time, it's just that there are times. I see people walking around in the grocery store. They're looking at things. They're trying to buy an item off of a shelf, and I see them mumbling to themselves, but I don't think they realize that they're talking to themselves. They're somehow integrating that process, but it's below a conscious level of awareness. Try to think, I'll just leave with this. Maybe try to think about how many bad moods occur from some of this ambiguity. I think this is a common thing. Someone will be engaged in a practice, they'll be doing some activity, and then they will, without noticing it, slip off into a thought about something that's been worrying them or concerning them. And during that moment, again, it's not really registered, it's not really consciously attended to, but they now have untied and disentangled some loose thread of concern, and suddenly they come back to the activity, and they feel in the back of their mind that they remember that they had been thinking about something. They don't remember what it was, but they know that they left it untied and unresolved. And rather than being able to recall it exactly, instead, it just gets experienced as like the dawning of a gray mood. This experience of, what happened? It's from a thought that was going on without awareness that we suddenly become aware that had been going on, and yet we know, without being able to retrieve it and re-tie it up, that something was left untied. Okay, thanks.